Okay, bring him in, JC. Bring him in. Right. Okay. We'll start in a minute. Hello. No, obviously I knew the whole time that this was already started. Just my dry sense of humour, team. Hello. What a treat to be with you for Digital Traffic Regulation Orders Technical Webinar 15. All sorts of exciting content for you. None of it from me, you'll be pleased to hear. I'll just be doing the introductions. What a long way we've come since the last webinar. Without further ado, can we get the agenda slide up, please? Gareth Tilley. You'll see today we're going to be talking about use cases and upversioning, some really positive news there. We're lucky enough to be joined by John Howard Booth from Leave, ladies and gentlemen. A bit of appreciation to give us an update on the spec. But before we do any of that, let's see the he insists on doing it. We have no choice in the matter. You all know this, but he insists on telling us about introduction to the D-TRO service. Take it away, Dr. Gareth Tilley.
Thank you, Paul. This one's very much for the fans. As Paul says, I'm sure the vast majority of you guys know this already, but we are conscious we do get new signees up, and John's going to run through the stats, and we do get new users to the service every time we do the updates for these webinars. So just the service, a very high level. It's an API first service, very simple architecture. So on the left hand side, we've got local authorities. We call them traffic regulation authorities. They publish to our centralized service. And they do that through an API. They do that through the publish API. And all that great data that we get from local authorities, from these traffic regulation authorities, all that TRO data is digitalized, and then it's free. It's openly available to any data consumer that wants that data. So that can be a really big organization, or it can be an individual just in their living room wanting to create an app or do some personal research as well. So what we've got is a centralized service. We've got the API first to publish and consume. That's all supported by a data specification, which has a data model in it. We've got this JSON schema. We've also support that with examples files and a whole other good things as well. In terms of these webinars themselves, they're technical. That's our kind of key theme. And the agenda is very much driven by a lot of the dialogue we have with you as a community. So that might be through our GitHub's issues board. That'll be through our user research. It's through our one-to-one sessions that we have regularly with people around the table. And then also we attend conferences and get really good feedback there as well. And it's also worth highlighting the advisory group. It's giving us some really good feedback and helping us drive the agendas for these webinars as well. Thanks, Paul. That's all I wanted to say in terms of an intro to D-TRO.
Thank you, Gareth. I, of course, as I have done on about 13 out of these 15 webinars, have forgotten to say, get your questions into the Q&A tab of the chat. We will look at those at the end. All questions gratefully received, or certainly received. Now, as is traditional, we're going to have a service update from our product owner, ladies and gentlemen. It's John Cooper. Hello, John.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm going to run through a few numbers on where we've got to on the service. These are the headline figures, 128,000 digital traffic regulation orders. That's up 17,000 on the last time. Publisher apps is up slightly from 228 to 231, but the really big increase in the last period has been on consumer applications, and you'll see we're up over 50, about over 25% in that period. So that's really good news that more and more consumers are tuning into the service and extracting our data. And then moving on, got some information here about the versions of the schema that publishers are using to publish D-TROs to service. And this is a side-by-side comparison between last time on the left and now on the right. And the big change here is that we've had some upversioning so that the orders in the service are the minimum, essentially the minimum level now is in 3.5.1 and higher, whereas before we had a much wider range of orders in the service. And then Ben Pauly's going to run through this in a bit more detail, but here's a good little graphic that shows that how that change manifests itself. You'll see that version 4 is in the minority, but that is normal when we roll out a new version, and it's only been since the end of May that we've had the latest version 4. That number will keep going up, and then when we get to the next versions, it'll all be changed again. Just moving on, I think there's possibly one more. Yes, so here we go. Version 4 is live since 29th of May. It will be the top version until we move into the autumn of 2026, at which point we expect version 5 to come, and John Howard Booth will be explaining a bit more about our program and release schedule. As Gareth said, we have the advisory group. We've crammed in one of those recently, and we've got another one next week. We like to get a clear August, though we don't have big meetings and webinars, because we know summer holidays will be in very soon. A shout for our GitHub, where the issue number is now over 160, and that is our preferred method of receiving feedback. There are other methods, of course, including to email us, and we are, I know we keep on promising that this is coming, but now we are very close to rolling out the full ServiceNow customer service interface. This will make all our offerings of what was previously the frequently asked questions and the technical documentation, including the API docs and everything, will all appear in one seamless area and will be fully searchable. This has taken quite a long time to come, not least because of the complexities of transferring documentation from one service to another and configuring it all so it does act seamlessly together, and we want to get it right. But we're getting into the last stretch of doing that, and that will be a great new addition to the service when it eventually comes. So I think that's all from me on explaining where we are with the service. Back to Paul, and we'll get on with the rest of the webinar.
Thank you for that, John Cooper. Those numbers just keep going up, don't they? And fantastic stuff on the upversioning as well. Well done, everyone. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce John Howard Booth to you guys. John, maybe you could start by telling us what country you're in.
I'm currently in Western Germany, enjoying a bit of leave, but nothing can keep me away from these, so there we go. So my job today is to talk to you about our release schedule and what's likely to come in version 5. So as John said, version 4 went live in production at the end of May, and the expectation is that we're operating on roughly a 6-monthly release cycle at the moment. So that would aim us towards the end of November for having a release of version 5. We are trying to stick to a regime and a schedule that says that we will get that release into the integration environment a month before it goes into production, and a month before that we will release documentation. So that implies that at the end of September we release the documentation for version 5. We are still open if anybody has particular things they want to see added or suggestions. We're open to until the end of August to consider those. We do have a shopping list that we'll go through anyway, but the opportunity is there if you decide, for example, there's a new vehicle type you want or something of that sort of nature, then please let us know. Next slide, please. A little bit of a dense list, and I'm not going to spend too long on going through each item. The reason why we're not going to version 4 point something is actually the top of this list, which is that we are refactoring how speed limits are modeled. So currently in the data model and the schema, speed limits sit outside the general list of regulation types and are modeled separately. And we've decided that we'll bring those in line with everything else. So in version 5 onwards, speed limits, along with every other regulation type, will be searchable in a similar way. We are doing some work to ensure that you can access speed limit regulations as they stand at the moment. I don't know, Ben may cover this off, but as it stands at the moment, if you do a typical search using the search endpoint, you don't find them. You can find them by other means, by downloading the full data set, but that's a bit tortuous. So we are introducing some interim steps to enable that to be visible, but as of version 5, we'll bring it all into alignment. Many of the other things are spots from users who said, could we do this, could we do that? So one was that we have the ability to specify which week of a month the particular regulation might occur in, but we don't have an entry in that list that says the last week of the month. And Josh from Islington very kindly pointed out that they've got exactly that sort of regulation. So that's one to add in. We've also had a lengthy discussion with the advisory group around how to differentiate different styles of geometry representation for diversion routes, alternate routes. Different styles meaning, do I have something which is like a waypoint where I have a start and an end point, and then every time I come across a road junction I add a waypoint in, or do I have something which is a full representation of the geometry of the roads for a diversion route? And so we will introduce some attribution to differentiate those two, because it's a clear point of discussion and that's been going on certainly with the advisory group. We've had requests from a couple of different sources for additional vehicle types. So get them in there if you have further requests, and we'll take those on board before the end of August. We've also had a request for some additional regulation types, and we're considering those at the moment. Also, a point of discussion, which we actually haven't managed to discuss with the advisory group yet, is a suggestion from our side that if you are modeling speed limits, that should really only be done using a linear or polygon. And so we're going to actually suggest that we block the use of point to model that. Point of discussion, so that maybe there, may not, maybe not. Second last one, we had a discussion coming from one of the TRAs who said, surely some of the regulation types are directional and can only really represent using linear, and that's true. It makes a lot of sense in certain instances. So things like mandatory turns or banned turns, every other form doesn't really make a lot of sense because it doesn't give you any sense of direction. So we will be looking at that and again discussing that with the consideration of possibly bringing that in. And the final one is we've noticed that some of the TRO records that we've had in have different types of height, weight, width, and we haven't seen a length restriction yet, but they do exist. And the way that they are being put in doesn't really fit with the way we expect them to be put in, and it means that we may end up with something that says this is a weight limit, but I don't tell you what the weight limit is other than in free text, and that's not the way we expect it to be done. So there is guidance around how that should be done, but actually we'll be looking to tighten that up so that if you do submit one of those, we'll expect you to provide a value for the limit that exists. And I think that's probably all from me, so I'll go back to Paul.
Thank you, JHB. It's very kind. Ladies and gentlemen, we've already heard a tiny bit about upversioning today, but we're going to hear a little bit more about it. It is my pleasure to introduce Ben Pauly. What's your role in this whole thing, sir?
Thank you very much, Paul. Hi, everyone. So if you don't know me, I'm the tech lead for the D-TRO service. And I just want to quickly run through kind of the results from the upversioning activity that we've been taking part with recently. So John Cooper at the start, I think, showed a nice visualization that showed how the landscape has changed in terms of distributions of D-TROs against schema versions. And so a lot of that has been due to the upversioning activity that we've been doing. So pleased to report that we completed our upversioning activity against the production data on the 6th of July. So just to actually recap for those who aren't aware of what this work is, back in the days, earlier on in the early days of the D-TRO service, we had earlier versions of the schema, and therefore we have amassed quite a large number of records submitted against early schema versions that are no longer supported in production. So the whole idea of the upversioning exercise is to bring those in line with the modern supported versions of the schema. So this work that we've done has actually upversioned almost everything to version 3.5.1. Which is a supported version. It's not the most bleeding edge release, and that's a deliberate design decision just so that people who haven't built their integrations to handle the latest bleeding edge version of the data model and schema can still kind of consume that data without necessarily needing to do all of that work at last minute in order to consume these records. The table on the right is quite a nice illustration of where we currently sit. So the three supported schema versions at the moment, 350, 351 and 40, you can see the overwhelming majority of records are submitted against those. We do still have some records submitted against earlier versions. So these were records that as part of our upversion activity, they actually failed. So there's three categories that these fall into. And what we're doing at the moment is a second pass through these to kind of catch these stragglers and make sure that we bring those in line with 351 as well. So just to kind of go through those categories, we've got exact duplicates. So these are records that after upversioning produced a payload that already exists, was completely identical to one. So we need to decide a strategy on how we handle those. There's a few that failed actually content validation after we upversioned them. So these are records that after we ran them through all the upversioners, they still had a couple of issues or an isolated edge case issue that meant they failed validation. But they are the vast minority of these three groups. And then the final one is changes to source data. So these are records that in the time between when we took a dump and export of the data and did the upversion and went to apply it back, those records had actually been changed or updated at source. So in order to prevent overwriting and losing those changes, we obviously didn't update them. The plan is, as I said, to do another pass through these and get to a stage where all of these are upversioned as well. So we've got a plan together and we're just working out how that fits into our timelines. But shortly, we would expect to communicate that these outstanding records have also been upversioned to 351. I think that's all from me on upversioning, so I'll hand back over to Paul. Thank you.
Well, not to let sunlight in on magic, Ben, but we did discuss in the pre-meeting that you would carry straight on into data quality. So it's my great pleasure to hand back, ladies and gentlemen, to our tech lead, Ben Pauly.
I think that was later on, Paul. I think John Howard Booth is going to jump back in for this one.
Bugger. Okay. You guys know better than me what's going on, clearly. So bake it away, JHB.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Paul. So one around D-TRO order titles. We see in the service at the moment quite a large proportion of submitted D-TROs that actually don't have a title that's very meaningful. That may be for a couple of different reasons, but certainly there are instances where there's very shorthand versions being submitted. And we're going to encourage, as best practice, a request that says, please, when you're submitting your order titles, as a minimum, please include your name as a TRA, the year, and an order descriptor. Obviously, there may be some of these may be more complex, so we can't hard and fast the rules, but that will be very helpful for those who are trying to interpret and use the data, rather than very shorthand descriptions that we are finding. It's also likely that this may be a matter that's mandatory within the secondary legislation, but obviously not. We can't prescribe precisely how they should be, but we are looking for the order title to be what the legal order is on your paper document back at the branch. And at that point, I guess I can hand over to Ben Pauly.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so just wanted to have a quick chat about the usage of USRNs within the D-TRO service. So there's been a big focus on data quality actually recently, lots of internal kind of investigations into the quality of D-TROs being submitted, and USRNs is kind of a focus area for us. So if you're not aware, USRN stands for Unique Street Reference Number, and it's a numeric code that identifies individual streets, roads, public rights of ways across Great Britain. What we're seeing in our service, or the records being submitted to the service, is that only a small number of those submitted orders actually include the presence of a USRN. This is kind of in contrast to what we expect, which is that probably the vast majority of records would be on a road that does have a USRN. So we would probably expect to see a significant proportion of the records containing these USRNs. Why this is important? Well, the presence of USRN enables a few things. Reliable road network matching is probably the primary reason. So rather than just relying on geometry or the text descriptions in some cases of like road names, the USRN is kind of a reliable way that we can match records geometries to where they should be against other road networks. It supports a lot of use cases for consumers in terms of downstream analysis that they're doing, and it improves kind of location traceability and just generally the data quality, obviously. So this is an area that we're kind of actively looking at how we can improve the data quality and the proportion of records that we see having USRNs submitted in them. It's going to form quite a big part of the further analysis that we're doing around data quality. So seeing geometries where we expect them to be based on USRNs. So without any USRNs, that makes that a little bit more difficult for us to do. So what we're working towards is really kind of going to be enforcing the presence of USRNs for those orders where we expect them to exist. And we'll do that through tighter validation. So if you're a publisher at the moment and you're familiar with the validation pipeline that D-TROs go through, we'll be building USRN validation into that once we work out how we do that. We appreciate that not every order will have a USRN. There are completely valid restrictions that won't have a USRN. So we're just in the process of kind of bottoming out what those rules are and making sure that we're correctly enforcing it where we should, but not enforcing it where it doesn't need to be enforced. So just wanted to provide a heads up on kind of the early analysis that we've done on this and where we're going to move to in terms of trying to improve the data quality by enforcing that tighter validation around this.
Can I jump in there, Ben?
Of course.
And just say, if that seems quite a low number to me, and we'll probably be looking into who is sending us them without USRNs, and we're happy to get into conversations about the barriers to providing a USRN, and look at what we can do to help with that. And so we're totally open to hearing those things on the regular calls that we have with service providers. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Paul. Great. Yeah. So now just wanted to run through a few of our major tech updates since the last technical webinar. So the first one is around the spatial search capability that we've been building. So this has been a long requested feature in terms of consumers being able to find the D-TROs that are of interest to them. So one thing that the service lacked was the ability to say, can I have D-TROs that fall within this area, for example? And we had lots of questions come in around how can I find them within specific counties or within specific postcodes, that sort of thing. So I'm pleased to report that the spatial search capability has been deployed into our integration environment for the time being. So yes, this allows consumers to provide a search area in the form of a polygon, and the service will return matching D-TROs that intersect with this polygon area. Yeah, consumers can define however complex spatial search boundaries they want to do. So as I said, if they're interested at a county level, as long as you can provide a polygon representation of that county boundary, you can use that. If you're interested at the postcode level, you can do that. Whatever level you're interested in, it's quite extensible in terms of being able to match records. So it's in our integration environment. We're just gathering kind of user feedback in those environments and some internal kind of feedback and further kind of performance testing in deployed environments before we actually finalize the deployment to production. But hopefully that's a feature that if you've been awaiting it for a long time, you're excited to hear that is coming very soon, and it's actually in an environment for test at the moment. Next slide, please. Okay, so now just to talk about provision level management work that we've been doing. This was mentioned at the last technical webinar as well, and I'm pleased to say that our provision level management functionality is deployed to the integration environment also. So just to recap what this is, provision level management is a new set of endpoints that allow addition or updates or deletions of provisions to existing D-TROs in the service. The kind of legacy method for doing this, if you require to add a D-TRO, add a provision or update a provision or delete a provision, required you to use the update endpoint and provide the whole payload again, which felt potentially a little bit wasteful if you have a large D-TRO that you're operating on and you're just trying to make a very minor amendment to a single provision. Sending the whole D-TRO back had a number of issues. So we've been able to reduce the need to send the full D-TRO by exposing these new endpoints, which has a number of benefits, reducing the overhead, processing time, and the errors that can occur as a result of this. So this is in our integration environment. It's currently undergoing, again, internal testing and limited user testing. We're still in the plan of finalizing the production release for this, but we're expecting to get this deployed very soon as well, so that people can start taking advantage of that in the production environment also. And finally, speed limit search. So John Howard Booth earlier on mentioned the way that speed limit data is kind of represented and modeled in the data model at the moment, and the limitations that that has in terms of being able to search for that data within the API. So this is data that is commonly sought after by consumers, but is not really discoverable through the search functionality that you might expect, given that how you would use that to find other D-TROs or other regulation types. The primary reason is because speed limits are not represented as a regulation type. So while you may think that you can pass in a speed limit regulation type, it doesn't quite work that way under the hood. So in the interim, until those changes are made, which John Howard Booth talked about, that will be coming into version 5 to refactor how this stuff works, we've developed interim search capability that can return these records using the same search API endpoints that you might already be familiar with. So here, a consumer can specify specifically speed limit value based or speed limit profile based regulation types in the search endpoint as part of their query. And although the data isn't represented like that on the back end, the logic handles finding records that match those search criteria and will return that data to you. The nice thing about this is it's been designed in a way that will just automatically work when the refactor in version 5 is done. And that was a deliberate design decision to minimize the rework that needed to be done, given that this is just an interim solution. So this is in our integration environment. As I've said on the last 2 points as well, we're just finalizing kind of release plans in production, but keen to hear any user feedback of those who are testing this out in integration. So that's it from me. I'll hand back over to Paul.
Thank you, Ben. Well, it's my favourite section now of the webinar is that because of, or in spite of the host of this section, I'll leave that for you to decide. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Dr. Gareth Tilley.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for your kind words again. We've been discussing this over the last few technical webinars, but we are very much looking at a focus around bridge heights, and that's because when we've spoken to people about the data we got on the service, it's clearly a safety critical element and clearly a safety critical data set. So people are very much looking to see how we can get that published to the service, but also then used by core data consumers like public transport operators. So we've got a couple of active use cases that we're developing with local authorities on this. So Oxfordshire County Council's one, and they've been working with Causeway, their DSP, and they've collated all their bridge height data, and it has been published to the service, but not quite in the format that we were hoping. So we're working with them, and our tech team, the dev team, is working on how we'll get that data into the service where it's more readily exposed and more readily consumable by data consumers. And similar position for Portsmouth. So Portsmouth have collated their bridge height data, so Paul Darlow's done that. And again, we're looking to get that published into the service, and then that can be used by data consumers, so public transport operators. The main use case we're looking at the moment in the Portsmouth area to reduce bridge strikes effectively. We have had discussions with other people as well. So I've had discussions with Stagecoach in the Southwest. They're very keen to do a pilot down there. And also Transport for Greater Manchester, keen to do a use case and a pilot of kind of how we'd use this bridge height data up in the Manchester area as well. But if you want to get involved, and if there's any use cases that you feel particularly strongly about, we're really keen to track those. And if you want to get involved in the bridge height pilot update, please just contact myself, and you can do that through the website, which we'll be putting up at the end of this webinar. Ben's going to run through some of the more technical side and the long-term future vision for how we'll be looking at bridge height data now.
Thank you, Gareth. Yes, so obviously Gareth has talked about the fact that we have some data already in the D-TRO service for bridge heights, and we're close to getting some more in. But we've been thinking about what the long-term plan for the data or bridge height data being in the D-TRO service is. And we've come up with a solution. So we're proposing that bridge height data will have its own submission and consumption mechanism. So it will still work within the D-TRO service, but you won't be submitting or getting data from the existing D-TRO's endpoints. The reason for this is differences really in data models between D-TROs and bridge heights. So we talked about trying to kind of massage bridge height data into the D-TRO format so that it would work with the existing endpoints, but actually came to the conclusion that the differences in the data model are significant enough that it warrants kind of its own submission workflow. And so for that reason, we're proposing that while it sits inside the D-TRO service, it's handled in a slightly different way. So we're kind of in the proof of concept stage at the moment for this, and we've developed two simple endpoints as part of that, following the same REST API design principles that you're already familiar with if you're using the D-TRO service. So in particular, we have a get endpoint, so you can send get requests to this to retrieve bridge height data, and you can send post requests to this endpoint with a body, adjacent body, to submit bridge height data to the service. So I'll just talk about those in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. So this is around sending data, bridge height data into the service. For this proof of concept, we've developed an incredibly simple bridge height data schema. You can see an example on the right-hand side there. So similarly to D-TRO payloads, it includes a schema version, so the version of the schema that you're submitting the data against, and then the actual data body itself. And you can see in this overly simple example, there are only 5 kind of fields: the type of data you're submitting, the authority, so that's a TRA, the height limit, the location, so where it actually is, and the survey date. I will stress, if I haven't done already, this is kind of overly simplified at this stage, and I'm sure many of you can already think of a million reasons why this won't work. But for our proof of concept, we've gone with this, and we'll be kind of working over the coming weeks to flesh this out into a version 1 that is actually usable for what it needs to be. So similarly to the D-TRO endpoints you're probably already familiar with, successful submissions to the service will yield HTTP 201 responses, and you'll get an ID come back. So in that bottom right image there, that's a database assigned unique identifier of your record. The data itself is saved into its own table. So again, I mentioned we're not trying to force this to be a D-TRO format that has to conform to that structure, because the differences are too large to really kind of make that easy and straightforward and maintainable. And similarly to the D-TRO endpoints, we have basic schema validation in place to validate these incoming payloads and ensure that they contain the things that they should, they don't contain things that they shouldn't, types are correct, that sort of thing. Next slide, please. So that's around getting data into the service, and this is around getting it back out. So at the moment, we have got some relatively straightforward functionality in terms of retrieving data once they're in there. So you can retrieve all bridge height records, you can retrieve single records by ID, or you can search by some criteria. Now, obviously, with this overly simplified schema, there's not a huge amount of criteria that you can search on, but location is probably the most important. So similar to the spatial search that I talked about earlier, being able to provide perhaps an area where bridge height data is and have the relevant records returned is probably of most use at this stage. So we've built that functionality in as well. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. It is just a very simplified proof of concept at this stage, but we appreciate the demand and desire for bridge height data, and so we're working diligently to kind of get a version 1 of this in place where people can kind of play around with it and use it. So excited to keep you updated on that as it progresses. And that's all from me. Back to Paul.
Thank you, Ben. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've had a couple of questions posed in the chat, and those have already been answered. Thank you to John Howard Booth. So what I think we'll do, Gareth, is we'll go over to your patented further information section, and then we'll come back to me and see if any last minute cues that need A's have slid in there.
Thanks, Paul. We've had a slight update to this slide. People will be pleased to know. So as John said before, JC said before, in terms of technical correspondence, the best way for us is really through the GitHub issues board. So that's an open board and everyone can see what you post there. So if you've got a query, that it means that we can, the service, and we can respond to that in an open manner. People see that response, but also potentially other users can respond as well. You can get a bit of a dialogue and a community going on particular issues that way. In terms of the service itself, if you want to create an account or register for the service, we've got the dtro.dft.gov.uk page, and that takes you straight onto our landing page there. For general inquiries, we've got the email address, and that's similar. That's dtro with the hyphen at dft.gov.uk. Our YouTube playlist, I'm sure a lot of people are aware of this. So all these webinars, all our technical webinars, go onto our YouTube playlist. We've also got our general webinars as well, and we've also got a couple of intro videos around D-TRO itself, but also some guidance videos as well, and something we might look at generating more of those in the future. So if people got any areas they would think a good kind of short YouTube clip type video would be useful, please give us a shout. And then finally, we've got the Transport Technology Forum. So again, on that page, we've got like an overview of the service, but we've also got some guidance there for decision makers and some documentation around there. So that's our further information. Back to you, Paul, see if there's any more questions come in.
Thank you, Gareth. There is one small loose thread. I imagine that JHB is typing about it right as we speak, possibly. But the question is, what is the relationship between the height restrictions in D-TRO and the NSG? Is that height, width, something else? The ASD records. Actually, maybe that might be more you, Gareth Tilley, or John Cooper. I know that we've done a fair bit of work in this area, meetings with GeoPlace and so forth. Did you want to comment on that at all, Gareth?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think we've had discussions with various people, and where there are certain data sets available. What we're finding when we're speaking to people is that none of those data sets are complete. And I think one of the things we need to reflect on, we are reflecting on the service from a policy perspective, is kind of exactly how we're cataloguing and the level of completeness that D-TRO provides in the longer term. But yeah, those kind of entries, and we know that when we've spoken to GeoPlace, not all the local authorities are providing data to them, and that data isn't mandatory as well for them. So we're hoping that over time, D-TRO can be the hub for this kind of data, and it'll be a useful national provider and database there.
Thank you, Gareth. What can you just comment on GeoPlace's attitude to this? Like, as I remember, it was kind of like, you guys have at it and take this over.
Yeah, they weren't. They were aware that it's obviously a critical data set, but the reality is, when we spoke to them, they weren't like getting regular updates, and not all the local authorities had provided them data. So they were conscious that they didn't have a national data set, which is really what, I think everyone out there would really, really want.
Thanks, Gareth. I believe it's height, weight, width. That occurred to me after I screwed it up the first time. I'm slow on the uptake, guys, but I get there in the end. Talking of getting there in the end, the question that we'll end on is, what's the latest on the associated legislation? So sadly, Paul, this is a technical webinar and we can't comment on that. Thank you very much, everyone. No. So where are we on that, and what can I say out loud? It's all progressing very well, Paul. The change of Prime Minister that we've had has, caused a little, bump in the road, because you have to write round to all of the other government departments, and when all those departments are having different ministers, you could see how that process kind of takes longer than it would do, and there was some delays in that area, but it's all very far advanced, and very soon we'll be coming out with something concrete. I do press my colleagues on this area, because I'm saying, you're not the ones doing stakeholder engagement. Like, we need to come and say something to these people to reassure them. But rest assured, as soon as we are able to say something on the new burdens, and we were hoping to do that today at one point, but we couldn't get it over the line. And as soon as we can say something about the legislation, you won't stop hearing about it from us. You'll be sick of hearing about it. So yeah, it's all in hand and moving forward. I'm sorry, I can't say more. Thank you. As the slide says, well done, everyone. You've been a great audience. Thank you so much for you joining us and for the team. Well done, guys. Take care of yourselves. See you at the next webinar, be it a technical one or otherwise.